Hi, today we're going to be talking about the Vanu Sovereignty Scout Rifle Directive, and why ultimately, while it's an okay directive to complete, it's not really worth doing and it can safely be one of your last directives. And in addition, the reward is not actually a particularly strong weapon, nor a particularly desirable weapon, so it should be pretty low priority even if you like scout rifles in long-range play. So, unlike most weapon directives, there are only 4 axioms required here. Because at the time when this directive was created, there were only 4 scout and battle rifles. Now there are 5, so you can safely drop one and skip one if you happen to dislike one severely, which I did, and we'll get to that shortly. So it's a pretty easy directive, because with only 4 axioms, well, it just doesn't take as long as most other directives, and the weapons in here are actually pretty alright. Not anything amazing, but they're pretty okay. You have the Vandal, you have your Auto Scout, you have your Close Quarters Scout Rifle, you have, your general semi-auto, you have your battle rifle, and you have your Doku battle rifle. And these things are all basically stat copies on every single faction, with the exception of the Doku battle rifle, which really just has slight changes depending on what faction you're on. So this video could actually largely be viewed as the Scout Rifle Directive in general. Of course, these are Vanu weapons, but large and behold, all these weapons are pretty much stat copies of each other on each faction. They all have equal equivalents, so you can kind of view this as a general Scout Rifle Directive review. And when you finish the directive, you will get a variant of the standard battle rifle, your Eidolon, your AMR, or your, I think on NC, it's the Warden. And largely, these directive weapons are not worth getting. Ultimately, they're all very mediocre upgrades at best on your default battle rifle, and they're just not really anything interesting. So we're going to go over each scout rifle and talk about them. What I think you should Araxium, what I think you should skip. So the Artemis, your Auto Scout, is a pretty easy Araxium. It's a pretty mediocre weapon, but it's a pretty easy Araxium on the whole. It's okay, low damage, low time to kill, or rather, like, a long time to kill. But it's decent, it's okay for what it is. This is a very mediocre, forgettable rifle. It's not terrible, but you're going to Araxium it and you're going to forget about it. I would recommend Araxiuming it. I don't think it's the one worth skipping. But it's not anything special in really any way. It's an easy metal, and that's really all it is. Your standard battle rifle, in this case the Eidolon, is also very, very mediocre. It's a 333 at 250 rifle with 20 rounds. It is fine. There's actually not really anything to talk about. It's just a standard semi-automatic battle rifle. Notably, it only falls off 1 damage tier, so it's always a 4-shot body, or a 5-shot body, or a 2-shot headshot, 3-shot headshot. And this is nice if you have aim, but ultimately it's still a relatively slow-firing semi-automatic. Hipfire accuracy is pretty junk. I would call it an easy Araxium, but it can be skipped. If you want to skip it, you can skip it. I just wouldn't really recommend it. I think it's fine for what it is. You can put a grenade launcher on it if you want to just be funny. So, I think the Eidolon is worth Araxiuming, but you can't skip it. Vandal is far and away the best weapon in the Soul Directive set. You should not be skipping the Vandal under any circumstances. It's a 255 at 334 with .75 ADS, good hipfire accuracy, a good reload, decent ammunition for the class. It's a great weapon. It'll take some time to get used to, and you can't really spam it as much as you think you can, but it's a really, really nice scout rifle. It's great. You should absolutely Araxium it. It's absolutely worth the time. And in general, if you just want to use a scout rifle, the Vandal is the one I would pick up. Now, Tomo should be in the regular directive now, so I'm going to talk about it anyway. It is on NSO at the very least, so we're going to talk about the Tomo anyway. Tomo is fairly easy to Araxium if you can headshot, otherwise skip it. If you can headshot, it's really, really strong. If you can't, you should skip it pretty safely. Honestly, I'm not going to talk a whole lot about it. Because I honestly am not sure if this one's been put into the regular directive like most other NSX weapons have, but it's a safer Axiom if you wish to go for it. Nyx is okay. It's another 255 at 334, just like Vandal, with some minor differences. It's got a bit worse hipfire accuracy, but it's got a quicker reload and less total magazine capacity. They're pretty similar at the end of the day, but you do not have .75 ADS, which does hurt the Nyx quite severely. It was actually my fastest Araxium for a very long time, but on the whole, I think it's generally one of the more skippable options here. Of note, unstable ammo is actually very, very strong in the Nyx because you can just kind of plot people at long range. Sure, you won't have any headshot damage, but it is actually fairly viable on the Nyx. Now, the Obelisk is the one I chose to skip. I actually really, really hated the Obelisk. It's a 185 at 334 rifle, and it has no drop. So, if you can headshot, or you're good with shot placement, it is good. Don't get me wrong, it's actually really easy Araxium. If you know what you're doing with your shot placement, if you can make use of this no drop, and if you can headshot consistency, because it's a 2-shot headshot at every range. Problem is, it fires really slow. For being in the same damage tier as, say, the Vandal, you're firing almost 70 rounds per minute slower. And, in general, I just didn't like it. I found it really uncomfortable to use, and I chose to skip it. I put 430 on it, give or take, and I just dropped it, because I didn't like it. But it is a fine Araxium. If you can make it work, you can make it work, and it has some neat attachments available to it, like it can be automatic when you're hip firing it, or you can put unstable in it. So, it's not a bad weapon. I just didn't really like it. This one's largely up to you. I chose to skip it, but it's largely up to you. And finally, the Directive reward, the Revenant. So on Vanu, this is essentially an Eidolon that has heat, and a unique ammo type. It doesn't actually offer a whole lot up over the Eidolon. In fact, if you compare the stats alongside, you'll notice that, sure, you have a slightly better reload, but you lose 2 rounds in the magazine, and you also have worse hipfire accuracy, because the Revenant has a compensator built in. Which means that you can't really hipfire the thing nearly as effectively. So, the Revenant is not the worst Araxium ever, but it doesn't really offer a whole lot. Really, the only thing it's got going for it is having access to Manticore ammo, which is just a slowing round, which is really, really cancerous to play against. But other than that, it's a very, very forgettable Scout Rifle, and it doesn't really offer up anything that the standard Eidolon doesn't. It is an upgrade on the standard Eidolon, don't get me wrong, but would I call it the most desirable weapon? Probably not, especially when you consider that the Obelisk also has heat ammo, so even having heat on this weapon isn't really a desirable trait, because the Obelisk is largely better, and also has heat. Still, it's an okay rifle, and it does look pretty cool. It's got a very nice model. It's pretty good for what it is, but at the end of the day, it's still an Eidolon, and the Eidolon isn't that great of a scout rifle, so it's hard to really recommend going for Revenant. The banner does look pretty cool. I will admit that the... Oh god, where is it? I have so many banners at this point. It's a pretty cool looking banner, all things considered, if you're into the banner meta. But on the whole, scout rifles are not a super worthwhile directive to complete. Sure, none of the weapons in here are particularly bad, but outside of the Vandal, none of them are particularly good. And the directive reward it's a slight upgrade on the Eidolon, but do I think it's worth Araximing 4 whole weapons to get? And those being scout rifles, which are generally not super fun, I can't recommend it. I don't think it's really worth your time. It's more of a character completion kind of a directive to complete rather than anything else. But, you know what? If you really, really like your scout rifles, go for it. Thank you all, and I will see you all again another time. Bye.